Here's my baggies t-shirt. I have put it on and decided I would like it to be this finished length, maybe curving up at the sides. I'm going to cut it apart and put the sleeve up here, and I'd like to lower the neckline to about here. The sleeve can be made tighter by about the distance from my knuckle to my nail. My first step then is to take the shirt to the ironing board and press it so that I've got side seams. You never ever press over a screen print like that. So I did that all the way down to the hems. Next then I want to get my center front. So I match up my side seams, place a pin, and that'll give me my center front. I do the same thing here at the shoulder seams. That will give me the center front at the All right, so in my booklet, Upscale Techniques and Nifty Necklines for Knit Tops, you will find the directions for what I call the Chico Twist, because I first saw this in a Chico outlet store. To do this, you need to very carefully follow these instructions, and this booklet is available PDF, and it's also still available printed, and if you purchase the printed version, you also get right now a free copy of my Londa's Terrific Tea tissue, so you have that basic pattern. All right, it says to stay stitch the neckline edge at a scant 1/4 inch, and I have done that. And then I folded it in half at the center front and the center back and measured. When I first measured, this turned out to be 14 inches, so double that is 28. The directions say that the finished circumference of the seam lined must be equally divisible by 1.5 for this to work out. So if you take 28 and divide it by 1.5, that is not an equal number. So how about if I stretched it to 28.5? Divide that by 1.5. Aha, that's an even number. So I can stretch this seam allowance a little as I do this so that it's 28.5. That's only a 1/4 inch per half, and you could make a knit do that easily. So now it says cut a 3 1/4 inch side crossways grain knit piece 1 inch longer than the neckline circumference. So we had 20, what do we have? Times, we came up to 28.5. So I need to cut my piece 29.5. What I've done here, so I have a piece now that is, this is from the hem, that is 3 1/4, which is exactly what the directions say. You can do it wider, that works out fine. Narrower would be a little bit of a challenge. What I did was I seamed together the two pieces from the front and the back. And I had two pieces because at that point I had not yet sewn my side seams. Then if you follow along in the directions, it has you mark a 1/2 inch in from each end and then every 1.5 inches, and I did that fully on the wrong side, but I also brought that marking to the right side along the long edges on the finished side. I had not done this for a long time, and it really is one of the weirdest things that you do, but you sew it into a tube with that 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then you just offset it by 1 mark and work your way around, not stitching in any tucks, but you're matching a mark on the right side at 1.5 to a mark on the inside 1.5 inches forward, and that's what creates this twist. Interesting? You have to do it to see how it works. Also, I'm stitching this at a scant 1/4 inch, and the easy way to do that is to use your width button on your sewing machine. I have moved the needle to the right. This is normally at 3.5, and I moved it to the right so that I can still guide the edge of the fabric along the right side of my foot pedal, but the needle is, not my foot pedal, my presser foot. but do you see that my needle is over to the right several notches? Because this is center and here's my needle. That's the easy way to keep your guide the same, but adjust where your needle rides. I have a whole YouTube video on that, so go check it out. This is what you end up with. And I know it looks really weird, but it's going to make a really interesting neckline. All right, since I know now that my neckline is 29.5 where this lace will go in, I do not have enough, by far, of the lace that I used around the sleeves. Now I could put it just in the front, but I think that's a tacky look. That's ready to wear. I have this handkerchief, so 4 sides, and if I measure one side, that's, easily 11, so 11 times 4 is 44, so I would definitely have enough of this one. How about this one? This one repeats the kind of scalloped effect, and it's not near as lacy. It's more compact. I would have 10 times 4, I would have 40. So that's plenty as well. So I think I'm going to go with this one because I feel like it corresponds the best to this. Both are crocheted. This is a little lighter scale, but I think this is the direction I'm going to go. Sooner or later you have to make a choice. So here I'm choosing between that and this. And I think this one, it's just more delicate. I think it risks getting torn up in the laundering process. So this is my selection. Next thing I'll have to do is very carefully cut this, and I think what I'm going to do is cut right along this hem stitch line. That'll give me a little seam allowance. Yeah, so that's my next task. Okay, so I cut it off, and I did not cut it along this row of hem stitching, but rather along this one, which obeys a rule that I have in upcycle sewing of always cut it bigger than you think you're going to use. I also didn't cut it apart at the corners, and instead brought it to my ironing surface, and with some good old steam, I could make what was a corner flat, and I think that that located at the center front will be a really nice effect. That's what I'll do next, because I need to attach this to the garment before I attach my twisted neckline. Here it is on my lap. I've pinned it on starting at the center front, working around to get the other corners equidistant from the side seam. And at this point, I have this much extra at the back. So now I'm just going to play around with it to see what I might come up with that excess, or if I just want to get rid of it and seam the edges together. At this point, I very carefully, here, let me unpin, stitched in one row of that hem stitching to secure the lace to the front to the t-shirt. When I did that, I purposefully put a contrasting color in my bobbin so that I would have that to follow as I stitched it on. Then I very carefully marked this piece in half, put the center back at the back, took the other half, matched it to the center front, and pinned it all around. Now, I'm thinking I very likely should take the time to hand baste this on, but I think I'm going to try with a longer stitch length with this side up and stitching just a needle width further in to secure this twisted neckline on top perfectly with the lace. I'm going to apologize one time for my lack of manicure. I garden, and that's equally important to me. So I do not waste my money in the summer very often on manicures. If I didn't tape because my fingers weren't all pretty like a lot of YouTubers are, I would make no videos. All right, that being said, this worked out beautifully, especially with that contrasting color for me to follow. Now what's going to happen is that this seam allowance is going to get stitched down. So I'll be stitching very close right along here, okay, in order to keep that seam allowance down. But do you see this neat little messy neckline with that lace? And so the lace will flop up, which I think will be just fine. I had thought it would lay down, but it will flop up, turn up, if I top stitch this seam allowance down, which is the way it really needs to go. So I need to finish this, but there's a lot of bulk in here. So what I'm going to do is leave this one the longest, because that's what will be seen, and I'll trim these two down closer. As I'm doing this stitching, I just want to emphasize that I can only go an inch or two at a time before I have to lift this up and make sure that that seam allowance is laying down, so that when I stitch it, it's where I want it to be. And of course you need a feline helper. Right, Musty? Meow. Here then is what that neckline looks like. I think the corners turned out kind of sweet here at the center front. And so you see the twisty, no, let me have it. The twisted Chico Twist neckline, just interesting. And inside it's pretty clean. I did have to remove, before I did this final stitching, some of the stay stitching, but I still would recommend stay stitching before you ever begin. Don't skip stay stitching, even on a knit. All right, so I've got the neckline and the sleeves. Now I just need to do the hem, and I think I'll shear it on the sides, but I'll need to try it on before I decide. To put in the hem, I just really like to give the hem some oomph, and for that I use these 1-inch strips of a knit fusible interfacing. These are from my friend Emma Seabrook, so Keezy. I carry them in black, white, and cream, and even though black would probably be best on this, I've got white open, so I'm just going to go with it. It's not going to show. I apply it to the wrong side, and it goes right up against the raw edge, and I fuse it on. Be sure when you fuse it that you've got the rough sticky side down. I know I have another video on this, but I'm going to just quickly put it here as well. So having that fusible in here just really firms this up. It helps manage the curling of the edge, and I just love it. I did not have 2 spools of this thread, so I elected to just do a single row instead of twin needle, and I did so equidistant from the folded edge all the way around, which means that inside I may have more seam allowance excess than at other places. So at this point, what I do is I take and lay it like this so that I can very carefully trim that excess hem allowance away. Okay, I've got to hold the phone here, but you see what I mean. And you've got to do it with the body down in front of you so that you don't trim like this and then maybe cut your garment. So flip it up. This is the body coming down. This is the excess hem allowance sticking up, and carefully trim it away. Some of you may be saying, well, why didn't she serge that? I didn't serge it because I didn't have the right color. Knits won't ravel, and with this fusible on the back, it's certainly not going to ravel. So there you have it. That's my hem on the inside, and here's how it looks on the outside. That's a 3 stitch length. All right, when I had it on my body, I determined, I put a pin saying I could have the shearing at the sides come up that far. That's what I'm going to do next with 1/8 inch braided elastic. I have a drawer here in my cabinet of all of my elastics. You see my clear elastin is kept in a drawer so that light doesn't get to it. And I'm looking to see if I have black braided elastic. Yep, here it is. In my pattern booklet, Sensational Shirring, I talk about all different ways of shirring with elastic thread in the bobbin, how I gather, all kinds of things. This again is one of my great little booklets. These are available with my pattern tissue now if you order it printed, or you can get it PDF and you'd have it immediately, but I get my orders out pretty quick. How do I do that? Okay, I think I've got a hold of this now. I've got the elastic stretched full throttle. I stopped with needle down, and now, let's see here, lay this right along the seam line, but in the seam allowance. Yeah, I can't really do this at the same time, sorry. This then is what that looks like. I zig into it and zag off of it. I don't want both sides of the zigzag to penetrate the elastic. That would take away from its stretchability. And then cut away your excess. I don't take it all the way to the bottom because this is just too bulky to gather up well. I can stretch this and get to the hemline. I think I'm going to do that. And then we'll go steam it. Here's what that looks like then from the outside, and I like to give it a good shot of steam. Kind of coax it in a bit and let it rest. When you steam, let it rest. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. When I did the second side, of course, I had to measure down from the armpit down the side seam so that I ended my second work at the same place that I did the first one. See, this one isn't looking quite as nice initially, but once I steam it, it will, for which I need 2 hands. Press this from the wrong side always. You don't want to press over that screen printing. So give it a final press, then I'll put it on my mannequin and show you what it looks like. Here's my final result. I love how that corner of the handkerchief accents the center front. I love a little bit of lace at each arm, and the scrunched Chico Twist neckline just gives some extra interest. The lace flipped up instead of down. It's top stitched here so that the seam allowance of this neck treatment goes down. Here's how it looks in the back. And at the side seams, that little bit of shirring just gives it a gentle curve, which I think adds some femininity. It takes away from the straight bottom of a t-shirt, giving it a little bit of curve. And curves are definitely the line message of this top. Curves all over it. And I personally love and believe in Jesus, our only hope. Jesus Christ, our only hope. I'll wear this with pride at the March for Jesus next Saturday here in Jackson, Tennessee. I hope you've learned some things from this little sharing video. Now I get to edit and put it all together for you. It's been fun though. I love to sew and I love to share it with you. Thanks for watching.